Amanda Tisdale, you are the co-founder of Autistic Wings Dance Company. Can you tell us a little bit about the Autistic Wings Dance Company and your story?
It is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, that is built from the ground up with the autistic dancer in mind. We have small class sizes, and by that, we mean 3 dancers to 5 dancers in a class. We never go above 5 dancers in a class. A lot of our curriculum, it's not, this gets very confusing. It is not adaptive dance. We are actually doing level dance for autistic kids, but we are adapting level dance to the autistic learning style and to the needs of the autistic kids, including but not limited to our innovative dance studio IEP that we've designed. Every autistic parent knows and either has a love-hate relationship with it.
Absolutely.
Um, we're very sensitive about the fact that a lot of autistic programming stops at 18. Our autistic programming goes from 3 to 99. If there is someone who's 100, we will have a discussion about that. And it is very much, honestly kind of want to say dancer led. Leta, my co-founder, and is my 13-year-old daughter. She was in dance studios, traditional dance studios, but because she's good enough to not be in the special needs autistic classes, she was thrown into the traditional neurotypical classes. And a lot of things she did were considered rude, though for someone who's autistic like her and me, we're shrugging, going, that's just normal, like not looking teachers in the eyes or stimming, or she cannot handle the studio's lobbies during class change. She'll sit there and yell, going, adults have lost their inside voices. And she has, sound sensory issues. Her voice tends to be higher than normal kids. All of that is stuff we don't care about at Autistic Wings. If your child's voice is a little higher than their peer group, it's not a big deal. I don't care. We're not pushing for potty training. A lot of the autistic programs around here, you have to be potty trained, you have to be verbal. None of that is required at Autistic Wings.
That's awesome. That's so neat. And you touched a little bit on some of the issues that we have in our normal everyday life. We don't do dance class or anything like that. Our little one is 5, so we have struggles with some. It's hard to say without like trying to be respectful about it, but
I have a
we
13-year-old who could probably say it for you, and she's a teenager, so she can get away with it.
he sometimes I feel like he should have to wear a sign around his neck because his diagnosis isn't obvious on the outside.
Yeah.
So we struggle. He's level 2 autistic, so that means like he needs some intervention, probably not as much as other children on the spectrum, but he does need quite a bit of intervention. But he's in a classroom, a normal classroom, for 80% of the time. And that's pretty massive for a kindergartner. And while he doesn't show his diagnosis necessarily on the outside, he does mask a lot while he's in public. He
Yeah.
he's so funny and so charismatic. Everyone just loves him. They forget about his diagnosis after 5 minutes. And I mean, it's pretty obvious after spending 10, 20 minutes with the kid that he's got autism, and it's pretty prevalent. However, he masks so well and he is so well behaved that often people forget that there's an issue. And we run into safety issues all the time. So
Oh yeah, Lita, she was completely nonverbal when she was born. She didn't have receptive or expressive until she was about 6 years old. She learned all that through dance, but I have people who've actually argued with me, including therapists, about her diagnosis. And I'm like, you can argue with me, but I'm going to go with the neurologist, not you.
exactly. Yeah, I've not had anybody argue with over diagnoses, but I have had just recently, as a matter of fact, the principal of the school he's enrolled in. We had a kind of an argument about safety, and like he's 5, and in his IEP it says he needs to have someone walk him from the door to the class, and the reason being is it's a safety issue, but parents aren't allowed in this inside the buildings anymore. So we had written in his IEP that someone would walk him from the door to his class every day. And I we didn't know that they were not servicing IEPs during summer school. And that's an issue. I They wanted me
Oh yeah.
to bring him to the school to get acclimated because he was starting kindergarten there. It's a new place, new school, new kids, new teachers, new everything. So they wanted me to bring him to acclimate him, but they didn't have any safety procedures in place. And it's like, okay, how many other autistic children are here today? Like, am I just throwing the sheep to the wolves? What are we doing here? It's incredible how that stuff falls by the wayside when you have there's opposite ends of the spectrum. Of course, there's extreme and there's non-extreme, and it seems like the kids who are in the middle fall through the cracks a lot.
Well, and she's not extreme, but she falls through the cracks because she cannot maintain eye contact. And she has gotten yelled at by dance teachers going, "You're being so disrespectful for not doing eye contact." I'm like, I hate it too. I have to mask when I'm doing eye contact. Um, she's had, she has an auto processory issue where she can't necessarily process the words. She's needs to visually see it, which you would think in dance class would be not the biggest accommodation. I've had so many teachers go, "She just doesn't know what I'm saying." And I'm like, auto processory issue. What part of that did you not catch? She's had a couple teachers because she has severe dyslexia, like reading is problematic. And they come up to me going, "Well, why isn't she reading? I've tried to make her read in class and she just like shuts down." And I'm like, Because of the dyslexia." And they're like, "Well, I didn't know dyslexia was a reading issue."
How do you not know that's a reading issue? It's reading, writing, all of the above. Dyslexia affects numbers as well.
Yeah. And there's so much new research on it saying that it may actually be the eye muscle itself that's a problem. And so for like a dancer, for her, they're trying to train her, pick a spot on the wall and just keep that spot as she's turning. Her eyes don't function that way. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I've told you this for like a season and you don't know why she hates you now. And
When
I
did
feel
you
bad
start?
because
When did you start Autistic Wings?
she came up with the plan last fall. She was tired of being in the studio. She was tired of her teachers telling her that she was a few of the teachers were misunderstood autism to the point that they thought it meant she was had the mental capability of a 3-year-old. And I'm like, "You're going to tell my snooty preteen that? Yeah, we'll have that discussion later."
I have
Um,
that issue all the time too.
yeah, and she's worked with some of the best choreographers in Hollywood and in New York who are from minority groups and they didn't have a space for themselves. So they made the space. And she's like, "Well, then we'll just make a space." So we put in the 501c3 paperwork early this year and we opened up the studio doors in September. But we have to be a 50c3 because we are not charging what we should for these classes. I'm not pricing these out of autistic parents' budgets.
Yeah, my wife and I were just talking about that this morning about how dance classes are so expensive and that we were talking about putting our son in gymnastics or tumbling or something like that. I think he'd really like it. Not only that, but I think he'd be good at it. So, but we checked into pricing a couple of years ago and it was too much. We couldn't afford it. I'm sure now we could be worked out on some kind of plan or something, but it was one of those things. It is expensive, but it's also therapeutic.
I worked out how much it's costing us because we are not going to have preschoolers in a class of more than 3 kids. I don't know how the neurotypical studios do it with 15 neurotypical preschoolers in a class. Um, but the price per month for a half hour class is $586 and some change. We're charging $45 a month.
Oh, yeah,
Plus, we have
that's
scholarships available.
wow. Wow, that's impressive actually. I mean, you're doing a lot. That's so at what age did Lita start dancing?
She started dancing at 6 because she also has a bum hip. She was at 11 months trying to do the Phantom of the Opera ballet guys pirouettes in our kitchen and decided to fall down on her hip, pop it out of joint. And the prevailing theory was, well, she's young enough, maybe it'll just move back into joint. Fun fact, it did not. And her physical therapist, when she was 6, who was trying to make it kind of function the way it should, even though it never will, was like, her stem happens to be a complicated 3-point tap move, right? Get this kid over to dance classes. So we dropped her in dance classes at 6. And within a few months, she was starting to try to say sentences, which I am not promising any parent that's actually going to happen to their child. But she went from not talking to saying full sentences where other people, other than her dad, her therapist, and I could understand her within 2 years.
Yeah, we so our son is verbal. He was so the way I taught him how to speak was I was having difficulty communicating with him when he was younger, of course, baby, and I was trying to teach him how to make sounds and how to mimic. And it turns out that was actually probably the best thing I could have done, as I propped him up and had him watch my face as I'm speaking to him. And it really helped out. And he's not average yet. He's still working on vocabulary and stuff like that, but it's mainly a speech issue now. So he does have an open vocabulary. He speaks really well, but there was probably a pretty good chance had I not taught him that way, he could have been nonverbal. But it was a challenge. We didn't really get a diagnosis until he was 2, and so but we kind of knew. And when we went to go get his diagnosis, it was like, okay, makes sense. And then we moved on, kind of like it kind of the way you said that um you don't try to get Lita to stop stimming or anything like that. You kind of
Yeah.
you allow her to be herself all the time, and that's how we are with Rocket. We allow him to be himself 100% of the time, and we don't stop the stimming or anything like that. As a matter of fact, we were considering ABA therapy there for a while, and it was like, okay, we don't want to change him. We don't want to change his behavior. We just want him to be able to function as he gets older. And we were having difficulty disciplining and stuff like that. It's just some stuff that we had to learn. And so we actually had a person come to the house, and they were called a parent caregiver trainer. And we got a lot of good resources from them. But I wanted to ask, since Lita started dancing at 6, and it wasn't until this year, earlier this year, that you started the tap studio.
Yeah, it's a full we're hoping to next yeah, it was this year. We're hoping to next year even have a pre-professional program for the students. But we she started at 6. She was put into the neurotypical classes, not into the autistic classes. By 8, she was working with Chloe Arnold, who is one of the top 10 tap choreographers of all time, according to multiple dance magazines. And Chloe found her during the beginning parts of COVID online. So, but Lita's always had a problem in the traditional studios. She can work with these amazing professional choreographers, and they just seem to automatically accommodate her needs.
So
But
it's did she have difficulties with other students in the classes?
she did. And I think most of that came from the adults because she's at 6, she was in with her own age. At 7, she was in with the middle schoolers. And by 8 and 9, she was doing a lot of work with the high schoolers. And so there's an age difference to begin with there. She's not going to be sitting there wanting to talk about her SATs or her driver's test or boys. And so she already acted younger, and then they were taking their cues from the adults. Like when Leta couldn't read last year at our studio, a lot of kids were going, is she a baby? How is she getting to work with Hollywood choreographers? Like she shouldn't be getting stuff I can't get because I don't act like a baby like she does. And so she was feeling like she couldn't find friends there.
That's that sucks, man. That really sucks. All it takes is one bad experience to ruin that experience, and I'm really glad that you and Lita came together and made Autistic Wings, because to see somebody's passion snuffed out like that, man,
Yeah.
it really sucks. Um,
That was one of the reasons she said she needed to do it is her dad's Space Force now. And we've been in multiple cities where the same thing has happened over and over and over again in studios. And she's like, if I'm getting this and I'm working with Chloe Arnold, who honestly the teachers would give their right leg and arm to be in the same room with, what are the kids who don't have a Chloe Arnold in their life getting? They're listening.
yeah, that's got to be tough to. Yeah, I don't I we actually deal with a little bit of that from our neurotypical middle son. I actually don't know how neurotypical he is. He has severe ADHD, and we haven't had him tested for autism yet, but we think he might have a touch of the tism. But um,
You know, the
he
latest papers from the last 15 years are putting it on the spectrum.
yeah, exactly. Yes. And I have severe ADHD too, and I'm being tested for autism in March. So um but we have an issue with him. Like he wanted when he was in the fifth or sixth grade, I can't remember which, he wanted to start playing viola. So we spent $900 on a viola, and it, we started facilitating, his love of music. And he went through 1, 2, 3 years of viola in a classroom setting in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. And now he's at the ninth grade, and he very much, he says he hates orchestra now and doesn't want to play anymore. And that just, it was so sad to me. And I asked him, why do you feel that way? And he's like, man, my instructor is not very patient with me. He yells at me in front of other students. He singles me out. When I can't sit still, sometimes I tap my bow on the floor, and he gets onto me in front of other students, and it makes me feel bad and stuff like that. And okay, I get it. But what about music? He's like, oh no, I've not lost my passion for music. I just want a different teacher.
Lita just did a short video for our fundraising kickoff to an artist, Livingston. Have you heard of him?
No.
He's autistic and very openly autistic. And he's got an entire diss song to all of his teachers previously. And Lita's like, this is our kickoff. We're going to do this for our fundraising kickoff this year.
That's awesome. That's
Um,
awesome.
and I'm like, I understand. I have some teachers who it's been almost 4 decades since I've been in one of their classrooms, and they're like, why are you still upset with what I did to you when you were in kindergarten? It stays
Some
with you.
I can hold a grudge for a long time.
Yeah. And they're
So I
like, you
was,
shouldn't hold a grudge.
yeah, exactly. It's always the people that deserve the grudges that say that, though.
Yeah.
But I was listening to your last podcast. I believe it was your last podcast. It was there was some issues with sensory issues, and the one of the things that I deal with all the time is people not understanding about sensory issues. And we were in Universal Studios. Boy, that was 2022. We were at Universal Studios, and we'd have to stop periodically when the sidewalk changed, so our son could touch the sidewalk because the look had changed. So apparently the texture must change as well. So he had to touch it and he had to feel it. And we're in the store sometimes. He has to feel people's pants and it it's accepted most of the time, but we've gotten some awful looks when people like don't touch me, kind of stuff. And what's it like to deal with Velvet or Lita?
She's sitting right here. Would you like her to come on and explain
Yeah,
it?
absolutely.
Rita, can
Absolutely.
you come discuss Velvet? Velvet. Here. You say hi?
Hey,
Hi. So tell me about how Velvet makes you feel.
can I burn it? No. Do I want to burn it? Yes.
Is it just the way it feels on your fingertips or all over your body?
Blah.
All over? Yeah, I kind of have that feeling when I get some textures on my fingers, it makes my teeth hurt. And sometimes when I get textures on my teeth, like cotton on my teeth, if I bite down on cotton, it makes my hands sweat. So I can definitely understand what sensory issues are like. What do you got? What are you drinking there?
What are you drinking?
Easy water.
It's water.
So the last podcast I watched of you guys, she was drinking hot chocolate. So
Oh,
that was funny.
it changes. There's was one that I think we'd gone to Starbucks right beforehand, and she was drinking mocha frappuccino with no whipped cream because she has a texture issue with the whipped cream.
Starbucks is my favorite. I drink Starbucks every day. As a matter of fact, it's what I'm drinking right now.
Her dad just came back from the Middle East and brought a Starbucks cup for us from the Middle East.
That's awesome. So you had mentioned he's in Space Force, and I'm a huge UFO nut. It goes hand in hand.
Oh yeah. He has been in space for, well, I guess 2019. He and his buddies were making fun of me because I've just come out of working politics to do this. And I'd been going, hey, y'all do know you're going to be in Space Force by the end of the year. And they're all like, no, we're not. And I'm like, I have worked on this.
Star Trek nerds.
Yeah, but
It was inevitable.
Space Force, the idea for Space Force and when the project started was when John F. Kennedy was still president.
Yeah, I don't remember any of that because I'm way too young to remember, but I know quite a bit of stuff about Starfish Prime and all the nuclear testing back in the day and all the satellite systems and satellite programs that we had, and then of course we went to the moon in 1969. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big fan of all that stuff, and it immediately perked up my ears when you said your husband was in Space Force because I'm a huge UFO nut, and Space Force is relatively new. So I think it's 5 years old or so, isn't it?
I want to say it's five. Yeah, because it's 2019. December 2019 was when we finally did it. I've been working on the project since I was 22. So it was a very long time coming for some of us.
That's awesome. So you were in politics before you started CEO of the Autistic Wings Dance Company. What was
Yeah.
that like?
I focused mostly on military stuff and on cutting through TRICARE red tape for families.
I bet that's a pain in the rear end. I could just imagine.
Most of the time, it turns out it was a commander should have known that there was a piece of paper they could have signed. And I'm like, this could have been fixed 18 months ago if you knew how to deal with your own troops.
Right, right. It seems like hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. But
And
yeah,
but
so back to the dance studio. What was it like when you were first wanting to start something like that? You obviously you and Lita had talked about it and had discussed okay, what do we do next? Like, what was that like preparing to start your own studio and getting the 501c?
I think getting the 501c3 was easier than dealing with some of the parents in the dance studios in town. There's a lot of neurotypical parents who are like, but I want my child. They don't understand autism as much as they should. They're surrounded by neurotypical parents. They want their child to mask, and they don't understand what masking does to their child. And there's a lot of dance studios who are like, well, we could do this over here if you would just tell us how to fit the autistic kids into our rather large neurotypical classes.
Right. Yeah. So dealing with masking, um, it's exhausting. It is really exhausting and it hurts sometimes. And my wife and I mask good part of the day. I'm actually masking right now. I have really bad ADHD, and it's it's uncomfortable in here sometimes. And we had we just redid the studio, and it's not completely finished. So there's some things that's catching my eye as I'm on the Zoom call, and it's like, it is what it is. But we we deal with the masking stuff quite a bit, and what makes it exhausting is when you have to come home, and when you're with your people and in your comfort zone, sometimes you absolutely shut down,
Oh, yeah.
and that can hurt relationships at home as well. So what is that what is that like? Do you have to mask yourself?
I am stopping it more than I am still masking. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, look, I have done this my entire life. I am tired of trying to be someone I'm not. I was in therapies as a child where they're like, well, if you don't mask, you're never going to have friends. And I think it hurt a lot of my childhood friendships because they never knew the real me. And by time we got to be adults and I'm like, I'm tired of this, they're like, who are you? My husband masks all the time because he's not diagnosed autistic, but the guy did not realize it was not normal to be going from your high school campus to the elementary school for speech and language pathology. um,
Yeah. Yeah, I can
I'm
get
like,
that. So I'm being tested in March. I've spent my entire life thinking there's something wrong with me, and realistically, it's more or less there's less wrong with me and more wrong with everyone else, in my
that
opinion.
I definitely think so. I, she's like, we have to stop to look at rocks because he's a geologist, but he went and got his first bachelor's degree in geology, then enlisted in the Air Force because when you get a 4-year degree, you enlist, right? Then got the Air Force to send him back for a geological engineering degree, another bachelor's, and then got a master's in geological engineering and is looking at getting his PhD in geological engineering. We have to stop to look at rocks. They are his trains. Like,
That's awesome, though. I mean, I like rocks.
but it gets annoying because, not, and this is
To stop every 15 seconds,
it,
some people would
that,
like to actually do other stuff than rock.
but the other thing that gets annoying is you have a lot of the adults in his life that were adults when he was a child are still like, oh, it's so funny that you're still into rocks. It's like, he's in his 40s. Just roll with this by now.
Right. I find that like people find that it's kind of weird that I'm still podcasting, I guess. They ask me, "How's the podcast going?" I've been doing this for almost a year now, about 11 months. And this is one of the things that I can hyperfixate on and be happy with. And UFOs is the same way. I listen to UFO stories as I'm going to sleep. So it's very I hyperfixate on a lot of stuff, but I can stick with it. If I like it, I stick with it.
As long as you're not hurting anyone, there's really no reason not to hyperfixate on anything.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And like the stemming thing, like our kid, he screams very loudly, and he rubs his hands together, and it's now it's to the point where when we're all home, sometimes I don't even notice it. And when he's being quiet, that's when the problem comes. But
Oh yeah.
we don't like we don't like when um now I've had people try to mellow him out a little bit while we're in public or while we're at a family get together or something, and like um that'll upset us enough to where we'll leave. And it's we don't like explaining that to people. It's like um when boomer grandparents, they want to use spanking, and like, okay, we can hit him, but then he's not going to understand what the hell we're hitting him for,
Yeah.
and it's and he's going to look at us and not understand, okay, why are we being violent, doing why are we hitting? And then he's going to think it's okay to hit. So anytime he gets upset, he's going to use the hitting as a tool, if you will, and he's not going to know the difference between me hitting and him hitting. And that's so parental boundaries barely exist there right now. He doesn't understand. I mean, he does understand authority, but he doesn't understand that mom and dad are authoritative figures and not friends at this point.
Yeah. Lita was so bad on speech that I don't think she understood any of that. Like you could tell her go find mom and she'd give you the blankest of looks she'd ever seen. Um, she also she did not cry as a baby. You're supposed to cry to let me know that you need like food or a diaper
Right.
change.
Right.
So we got to by time she got verbal, she had kind of come up with the idea. Like we had to carry her. We were stationed in the Space Coast of Florida. We took her to Disney World a lot, which helped with the stimulation because she was like 2, 3, 4 going to Disney World. And they're like, you could take the passes. I'm like, no, I need her to kind of understand how to get overstimulated in a place where I can remove her and still go find something else fun to do.
Right. And that's a learning experience for both of you. It shows you how to react in the situations as well.
Oh yeah. She was carried a lot though because she would run off like from us. She was when we moved out to New Mexico, we put her in a private school for kindergarten and she ran off multiple times while they had her at field trips and I'm like, "You do understand what elopement issues are, right?"
That's what I didn't know. It slipped out of their hands.
Um,
They never know this.
but then it was like, I'm homeschooling her because I'm not
Yeah, we're
you keep
almost to
losing
that point ourselves.
it for us worked a lot better because I could put the curriculum, especially with her dyslexia and stuff, we could target it directly to where she was.
Yeah. Yeah, and so also the routines that
Yep.
you can keep the routine and the scheduling and all that stuff, like you don't have to put it in someone else's hands. It's in the child and your hands.
Oh yeah, and like the dyslexia fonts are not widely used in schools. They should be. They're definitely not used in dance studios or extracurriculars. And it's like, but I can buy her all of her reading stuff in the font she can kind of see.
Right.
Plus, it meant we could go to therapies when every other school age kid was
Right.
at
And
school.
and one of the issues that we have with public school is, again, there's that safety issue, but there's also the issue of we don't know how he's treated when he's away from the home. And I'm sure a lot of parents feel this way about their kids, but I think my kid is really cool. I think he's really awesome, a really cool kid. And the thought of someone mistreating him because they misunderstood, it breaks my heart. But that's a reason in my opinion, to keep him in public schools is so he faces that challenge every day because one day I'm not going to be here.
With my former job, I got to deal with a lot of parents who were crying because their kids were definitely abused by the system. But I got to tell them, hey, that's legal, right? They are legally allowed to do XYZ. And the parents were like, what? And I'm like, what we need to do is change the law. If a parent's not allowed to do it, a teacher shouldn't be allowed to do it.
I think so too. I think that as well. And I think so. Our our schools here probably aren't that much different from where you are. We're near Kansas City, and there's a lot of people here are it's not that they don't care. It's not that they're unpleasant people or anything. They're complacent. A lot of them are complacent. And for us, that's an issue because you can't be complacent with an autistic child, especially one with elopement issues. And they asked us, does Rocket have elopement issues? And we're like, not that we know of. But the key word is there, that we know of. We don't know. Like we are so attentive with him. We pay more attention with. So we took him down to Universal Studios, and like you were worried about Leta running off. You carried her. Well, we had a backpack with a leash on it. We we didn't use that, but we took it just in case. And we got him strapped into the. Do you need to take a pause?
I don't know what he's doing, but I think it's okay. If you're okay with it, I've
Oh
gotten
yeah, I'm
used to it.
fine with it. I'm fine with
He
it.
is
It
a
was so
spoiled, rotten rescue, is what he is.
we so it's very very relaxed around here. I don't like to be too serious or too scripty on the podcast because that's not me. That's not who I am. So authenticity is the name of the game here. And but anyway, we had gotten a leash system for him. Luckily, we didn't need it, so we didn't use it. But we had also had multiple things backups that we could use, or we could have carried him. Um, but having having those issues and or not knowing what kind of issues that we're going to come across, I don't want the school to discover that accidentally. You know what I mean? I don't want to
Oh, yeah.
discover that he has elopement issues accidentally. So I think complacency is an issue where we live. Oh, how about where you live?
I think it definitely is an issue. I think there's a lot of, we're in a very conservative area with a very high military concentration. You have Carson, you have Schriever, you have Peterson, you have the Academy, Air Force Academy. I think the school systems have gotten very complacent in even teaching what autism is. I'm pretty sure they're all stuck back in the 70s. And
Yeah.
I get that the 1978 bill brought therapies into the school system versus keeping them as private. I think that may have done a little bit more harm than the people that wrote those bills were hoping they would do. And I think around here, a lot of our special needs teachers, even they don't know the entirety of autism because they've gotten so complacent. It's not just not knowing the elopement issues are coming. It's they don't know what elopement is.
Right. which is which is weird because like when I was younger I heard that I heard elope all the time and I thought of weddings because when people elope for a wedding they run away to get married. And so when I started hearing that word applied to neurodivergent people, and I was like, oh, run away, that's what that means.
You would think that that would be very easy to understand. And I mean, we have never had her in a larger city, though Denver is just an hour up the road. So it's not that far away. My sister has had the same problems in Denver, though, with her kids. And she's like, you guys, we're supposedly a large liberal accepting city. How are you guys so old fashioned?
I think it's just that when people, like when you said, when people think of autism, they think they go right to the worst case scenario a lot of the times, and autism is a spectrum, and it can be as simple as someone who doesn't appear to have any issues at all to somebody that's nonverbal that has to have help going to the bathroom and stuff like that. So it is a very wide spectrum. And I think people not they have to almost run into the issue themselves before they educate themselves on it, you know. And me, I never really educated myself on it. I just been around autistic people or people with autism most of my life, so it's it's always came naturally to me. And when I found out that my son was diagnosed, it wasn't a shock to me. It wasn't doom or gloom or anything like that. It was just like, okay, this is what we're doing now. So I get that same feeling from you. The way you deal with it is, it's, oh well, this is what we're doing now. And I'm very impressed with Lita understanding that, listen, we need to do something here because I'm not the only kid this happens to, and I don't want this stuff to happen to everybody else. So let's do our own thing. That's very impressive for a young person, let alone, you know, a child who has had her whole life struggles, and then one day she says, "Wow, let's start our own dance company, mom." What was that like for you to be able to say, "All right, let's do it"?
It was kind of like jumping off a cliff. It still feels like we jumped off the cliff without the parachute. Part of me was really proud. I cannot take all the credit though, because it does take a village to raise a child. And the group she's with in Hollywood, the parents, the choreographers, the other kids have all helped bring her to where she is. They have never othered her. I'm pretty sure most of them might be on the spectrum themselves, but um
I think there's actually a lot of people that are on the spectrum that never got diagnosed. And I think a lot of people on the spectrum are misdiagnosed.
I agree. I um there is definitely a higher amount of people who are diagnosed because the military is now 3 out of every 5 military kids is autistic, which is an extremely high number when you consider the normal population is 1 out of 36. Something's off here, people.
Drag all the autistic
Mm.
people to the military?
That's very interesting because um not to get into an anti-vax conversation, but the military has a high vaccination rate.
It does. I also think she's possibly right. There's a lot of the military has structure, and autistic people tend to gravitate towards structure.
Actually, now military services and the three-letter agencies are openly recruiting people who have ADHD and high anxiety for those jobs because we're just naturally good at it, I guess.
Yeah. And it is what it is, but I definitely think my ADHD just showed up. I have no clue where it's going with that.
We were talking about what it was like for you, just jumping off the cliff without a parachute.
It's been fun, but it has been a little stressful. And it is I am so proud of her for having this idea. I'm so proud she is working day in, day out along with us adults. It's not like she just had the idea and then poof, she went off to do her own thing. Even so far as when we've been working on um tweaking the dance studio IEP, because it'll probably be 5 years before we have a really good version. She's been coming up with things like, you forgot to put allergies on there, mom. You didn't put sensory issues, and we need to know like every single sensory issue on there, mom. She is coming up with, don't forget this, don't forget that. And she has gone to every single meeting we have had with sponsors. She is in all the board meetings.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome and impressive. I don't think even I'm almost 40 myself. I'm 39 this year. I don't think I have the patience to sit in boardroom meetings. And the way I set up my company is so I didn't have to do things like that. Um, we set up a partnership, but for me and my wife, and we were going to go uh, even further with it. But then I started reading, and I was like, nah, I don't want a board because I don't want people to tell me what to do. And that's why I'm starting this thing in the first place, is because I don't want people telling me what to do. So that's is very impressive, especially for a young person. But so has it been more stressful than fun, or would you say it's been more fun than stressful?
I think it's been 50-50 depending on the day. It can be way more stress, especially when you're dealing with a lot of parents and with a dance studio culture that is like, why do we need this? And dealing with parents who Leta has a whole rant on our podcast about parents who are like, oh, well, I'm afraid my kid's going to act autistic at your studio.
Kid's never gonna talk to you again, probably. Not my fault.
I I agree with you, Lita.
Um, but and then dealing with the money issue, especially when you're getting we know we have big donations coming in because businesses will throughout the year say we're going to donate to you, but businesses donate on a fiscal cycle in January.
Yeah, you're dealing with pledges and not actual money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's got to be
it's
difficult.
but on the other side, watching the students we do have come in and bloom and enjoy dance and have a space where they don't have to worry about if they're being judged for their quirks and where their parents don't have to worry about being judged for their quirks. Because
Absolutely.
the number of people who at other studios would come up to me and go, did you know Leta was doing XYZ? And I'm like, she's autistic. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I don't. I deal with some of that stuff myself. Like my 5 year old uses our house like a jungle gym, and like he's allowed to. It's from a very early age. We couldn't stop him from climbing, so we taught him how to do it. So we just let him do it, and if he falls, he falls. He'll be okay, but at least he'll know how to climb. And so he uses our whole house as a jungle gym. And when people come over, sometimes it makes them nervous, and like they point over to the kitchen, and he'll be climbing up to the top cabinet, and they'll be like, Rocket's climbing in the cabinets. I'll look over. What are you doing, Rocket? I'm getting crackers. Oh, there you go. He's getting crackers. He'll be all right.
My favorite with my nephew is he has always been into Rubik's cubes, like with a passion into Rubik's cubes, and he wants to use them everywhere. And people come up to my sister and go, do you know Brian's doing Rubik's cubes while he's talking to people? He was 2/10 of a second from going away off to Worlds this year.
Wow. That's
Um,
awesome.
he, he's a very disappointed teenage boy right now because 2/10 is just really
It's
close.
it's right there.
Yeah.
It's right there. I can't even think that fast. So
But that's his STEM is working on Rubik's cubes.
I have a stim too. I it's a terrible one. I smoke cigarettes, and now that like so I started early, like, and I find it difficult to quit. And now the older I get, and the more research I've done on ADHD and autism, it may be stemming that I like doing the hand motions and stuff because I can stop if I'm inside, and I don't smoke in my house. So it's very easy not to smoke inside. I don't I can go to work and I'll work. I don't have a job, but I can go to work if I had to and work 8 hours without a cigarette. So maybe it's one of those things that I stem doing that. But I the what really interested me and wanting to talk to you in the first place is because you think like I do in that stopping the stem is a bad thing, and we should never suppress the stemming, even if it's unless it's a negative bad stimming where they hurt themselves, or like I know a kid that pulls his teeth out. That's kind of weird, but um, it doesn't hurt him. He doesn't. It doesn't feel pain. That's his stem is pain. So like he's going to cause himself pain to stem. So I do understand that some stemming is destructive, and we curb that, but we can replace that with non-destructive stemming. And I'm a big proponent of just letting people be themselves, letting everybody, Leta, you, me, we should all be ourselves, and we shouldn't mask. And I think a big part of the problem is, well, I mean, obviously sometimes we have to mask, but a big part of the problem is back when our parents were younger and their parents were
Yeah.
younger, they
Sorry,
would
I want to be on this couch too.
they would make make us stop and be like everybody else. And in the United States, especially, we are a very individualistic society. And I think it'd be helpful if everybody could be themselves. So if we go to the store, we know they expect everybody is there. They're going to be individual people. And I do understand the need for, like in the military, everything's standardized and stuff like that. But I mean, people can't be that way. We are all just people. And I encourage everybody out there, if you have an autistic child, or if you know someone who has autism, like please don't ask them to stop doing something that you find annoying. You just go the other way.
I mean, it's even more than the stimming, like Leta, and I know this is not just Leta because I too have to mask in order to look someone in the eye. That we're not being disrespectful. It's just looking you in the eye.
I never like people in the eye. What do you think? I'm gonna bow down to them?
She's a little opinionated now, but that's a good thing.
I agree. I agree. I think looking people in the eye is sometimes it's aggressive, and but myself, when I'm looking people in the eye, I think that helps me focus on them. But that's just me. I don't really require people to look at me while I'm talking to them.
Yeah, we've both had people go, "Oh, you must be so disrespectful because you won't look me in the eye." And I'm like, "I'm sorry."
Respect me, I respect you. Okay, okay.
I man, I've never actually had anybody say that. Like I've never actually had anybody say your kid is disrespectful because he won't look me in the eye. I That's just wild to me. I can't even
I've
fathom
had it
somebody
in
saying that.
multiple states where people are like, "She's being disrespectful. She won't look people in the eyes." And I'm like, I we had her in ABA for all of 4 weeks. And one of the things that they were trying to do was they're like, well, she needs to look uh, us in the eye and you need to look us in the eye. And there were some other things that went on. And I finally called up her developmental ped and went, Frank, either we need to stop ABA or you or I are going to get in trouble for getting a little aggressive with a therapist.
Yeah, I told my wife that's one reason why I didn't want ABA for our son, is because at the very least I'd have to be there,
Yeah.
because I could not I couldn't I couldn't sit in the same room as somebody that would say, well, you have to stop doing this until you look at me. And I'm be like, well, he doesn't want to look at you. Please stop that.
There's
I
a
would have a hard time keeping myself calm during that.
there's a newer version of ABA that is not ABA, but they're calling themselves ABA. And I'm like, y'all need a new we're
They tie up children's
it's
hands.
just play therapy and it's playing to try and it's taking occupational therapy groups and going one step further in how to interact with people, but it's not the aggressive ABA of yesteryear.
Yeah, the aggressive ABA therapy, I don't think it does anybody any good, because at that point you're just training them
I'm
like a
sorry, I
dog.
want to be on
That's
this
Yeah.
essentially what you're doing. It's behavior modification, and they use the same Pavlovian principles with children as they do with dogs. And I'm like, my kid's not a damn dog. And as a matter of fact, I say all the time, like when somebody asks me about Rocket, and I'm like, well, you can ask him, he's cooler than you are. Like he's amazing, amazing. And anybody that hangs out with him, like, will they'd rather hang out with him than adults because he's so cool. But he also understands more than what you think he does. And him and I, as a matter of fact, I talk about this all the time with my wife, and it's kind of surprising when she's surprised, and it makes me feel good. But I'm his main caregiver, so I spend a lot of time with him, and he and I have a lot of conversations that I can conversate with him, and he can be attentive but not verbal. I know he's listening to me, and then he will follow, 5-step commands with no troubles. I will tell him to go do this, 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 and this, and he will go do those things and come back and not have to say anything. And it's very fun when he does those things, and uh, other people get to see it because they're like, oh, he understands. Oh, he's not as dumb as we think he is, or whatever. And
And they're
it's
not dumb.
exactly. He really understands more than what people think he does. And as a matter of fact, from a very early age, 2, 3, he was telling us how to get to grandma's house. So we live in a city that's 40 square miles. Grandma lives across town, but he knows how to get there. So that's very impressive for anybody, under the age of 10 anyway. But like a 4-year-old, are you kidding?
Lita does a complicated tap move where she does a crisscross with her legs, jumps into that crisscross. She kind of 180 turns on the floor without lifting her feet. And then she goes into a jump, 360 jump in the air. And you shouldn't do it the way she does it because she continues in the same direction. And neurotypical kids have tried over and over to do her jump. And she's laughing because the older kids at her studios have tried to do it and they fall flat on their face because their brain's not wired right for the jump.
Can you video it for me?
Because I didn't want to be mean to the teenagers and video it for you to laugh.
Nice was out of the window like a whole year.
But
and they were laughing at me.
It just because, and I do think your brain has to be, everyone I've known who can do it, their brain's not wired right.
Yeah,
Because your body. Yeah.
I think it's a superpower, though. I think autism is a superpower, and I think ADHD is a superpower as well. And we talk about it all the time about ADHD because I deal quite a bit more with the ADHD side of things than I do autism because um, my little rocket's only 5. So as he grows, I'm going to have to deal with it more. But we deal with ADHD quite a bit. And my 15-year-old doesn't like to sit still, and he doesn't like to um, pay attention in class, and he gets terrible grades. And everybody's like, well, why don't you make him do this? Why don't you make him do that? And I'm like, well, why don't you come over here and make him do it? Because I don't, I've been trying for 15 years and he's not going to do anything that he doesn't want to do. But it's almost like this world wasn't built for him.
No,
And
I had a professor who got mad because I cross stitched in class. I'm not in college anymore, thankfully. And he took my cross stitching away and my grade dropped by 3 letter grades.
yeah,
He handed it back.
that's the kind of stuff that happens with people who have ADHD or auditory processing issues or autism, or there's a whole bunch of things that make us to where we can't sit in a classroom. And I think the American education system, the public education system, was actually designed to make workers and factory workers and manufacturers and farm workers and stuff like that. So the public education system was not built or designed to handle children who are outside of that spectrum, outside of manufacturing. your child's never going to be in manufacturing. They probably don't need all that much manufacturing education, but that's what the education system was designed for. And over time, I think it started in the late 80s, early 90s. Over time, our education system started shifting from making workers to thinking that we have to be the smartest people ever. And that
And
is
those guys
not
don't do well in education systems.
right, right. It's a blanket that they try to cover everyone with. And it's not even more prevalent nowadays that things are changing, people are changing, and we're not made to sit and do the same tasks over and over and over and over again. Lots of us can't even fathom doing that, let alone attempting to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and dance, you kind of do have to do the same task over and over again so you can get proficient in it. But the way they're teaching it once and then expecting you to be proficient in it. And they're not doing that repetition of do it until you get it right. And they're like, but the parents want to see them doing leaps and turns. And it's like, yes, but you didn't give them the foundation so that they can do it without looking. I get worried watching some of these dancers. I'm like, you're going to break your neck.
Absolutely.
But that's the other thing is, the dance studio education system is not set up to produce dancers anymore. And this teachers will sit there and tell you, well, I don't know that I'm having a dancer come out of this studio. And it's like, well, you've just set yourself up for failure then. If your whole thing is these kids aren't going to be dancers and you're not training them like they're going to be dancers, then they're never going to learn dance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this is a good spot to kind of wrap up this conversation. It's been a little over an hour. I wanted to ask you if you ever heard of autism in entertainment.
I have. We have just connected with them.
Okay, great. Because I was just getting ready to say I did a podcast with them a while back, and I can hook you up with some contact information. But if you're already on it, that's great because those guys are so wonderful out there. And I don't there's so Marlene Sharp is who I talk to, and she actually works with Judy uh, uh, Utah, I think is her last name. They work in combination together, but there's a lot of exciting stuff that they're doing. And Autism and Entertainment just finished up doing a project with Love on the Spectrum, and so I think Leta's story might be kind of a cool thing to for them to highlight. And like they were just out at the San Diego Comic Con this year, so maybe we
I
get
talked
some.
to
Go ahead.
I talked to Marlene for a little bit. She's going to come on our podcast, and I've got some dance contacts I'm going to put her in contact with because they don't have a lot of dancers yet with the autism and entertainment
Yet, but they're
yet.
gone too. So
Yeah, we need to just get them connected to the right people.
absolutely, absolutely, and they've done some recent work with Nickelodeon and Disney, and I think that it would be it would behoove them to give you guys a call and have that one more thing that they can add into the repertoire and maybe get you guys contact or connected with some people in Hollywood. So
Yep.
awesome. Well, I think I'm going to reach back out to you guys here in about 6 months or so and see how you guys are doing, if you wouldn't mind.
We wouldn't mind. Thanks for having us on, and thanks for dealing with this craziness over here.
Oh no, it's quite mild compared to what I have to deal with every day, and I'm not talking about from the autistic child. My life is a series of. I wake up in the morning to chaos, and I go to bed at night to chaos. So,
The more chaotic one was kindled so that I could definitely get through a podcast without the Beagle Lab mix running it.
oh, I bet that's so cute.
It's cute, but she's got that beautiful Beagle coloring with a lab size body and a beagle mind. And it's like, those were two working lines that were never meant to be crossed.
Right. That's hilarious, though. But all right. Well, it's been a great conversation. Amanda, it's been awesome to meet you. Leta, you as well. And the name of the company is Autistic Wings Dance Company.org. Again, that's Autistic Wings Dance Company.org. And you have a podcast. Can you give your podcast a shout out too?
Leta Tap Styles. It's on YouTube. And everywhere you get your podcast.
All right. Well, it's been great talking to you guys. I'll reach back out in a couple months and we'll go from there.
Thanks so much for having us on.
See ya.